And I have been lovingly supported through this process, and Dr. Eric will come up and explain and talk to some of the people that should be acknowledged in the room. But I want to talk about the wonderful work that we got to read, and our two winners will display their amazing scholarship. Research is formalized, in curiosity. It is it is a seeking that he who wishes may know the cosmic secrets of the world, and they that dwell within. So I know rehearse now.
Yes.
We dig, we research, in our wonderful world of theater. We unearth it, and here we are going to have some presentations that demonstrate it. Can we please have a moment to acknowledge our young scholars from last year? One who has now successfully defended, and another one who is successfully defending the lead. And I move on to our first recipient for our undergraduate Randolph Edmonds Young Scholar Competition awardee, Zenzele Etwaru Davis. A recent graduate from the Theater Conservatory at Purchase College, Zenzele Etwaru Daniels received her Bachelor of Arts with a focus on theater and directing in May 2024. Please stand. She was given the vote of a non-dollars award for a senior scholar and artist for her senior thesis. Zenzele currently works at the American Mime Theater in New York City on the production team. Prior to that, she served as the project manager for the Black Arts Institute at the Billie Holiday Theater, where college and university students from across the country who studied the theater ways such as Ruben Santiago Hudson, Michelle Shea, and more. She was a featured character in the national tour NPR Presents Water Plus, directed by Kenny Leon. Zenzele serves as the director of service to Kenny Leon for Shakespeare in the Park Hamlet. Zenzele has spent her life observing art and storytelling, as she believes in a steadfast commitment to telling and writing global stories for Black voices. The title of her work, Black Art is Protest. Black artists responding to and shaping the Black Lives Matter movement of 2024 is our 2024 undergraduate award-winning research paper. Please give it up.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Okay, so before I begin, I'd like to give a special thank you to the leaders of Black Theater Network for having a vision for Black theater field that includes the next generation. A special thank you to Dr. Iris Middleton. Thank you to all the Black artists who took the time to help tell the story for my piece. Donna Walker-Kuhn, Michelle Shea, and Ken Leon. I'd also like to take the time to gratitude to all the Black artists I would watch from the sidelines growing up who ignited the reason why I wanted to write this piece. I also like to thank my parents, of course, for encouraging me to always show up as my authentic self. I would also like to give homage to Black artists who use their work to speak out against an unjust system, as well as the Black souls that lost their lives due to deep-rooted hate. A hate we all see displayed in one orange man. Hate cannot win, and according to Vice President Kamala Harris, we will not go back. My paper is titled Black Art is Protest, and Black artists responding to and shaping the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020. Black artists, those in the mainstream and those whose names are not widely known, in theater, music, visual arts, and dance have used their voices to create greater equality. Whether they were the first or only Black artists or if they were using their art to speak out against an unjust system. From the Black arts movement of the 1960s and the 1970s to the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, there was a lineage of art that is protest. Quote, "Prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, threatens the future, and renders the present inaccessibly." Maya Angelou. The first slave ship, the White Lion, landed on American soil in 1619 with 20 enslaved Africans, forcibly removed from their home continent and transported to North America as enslaved free labor. Since then, America has faced deep-rooted systematic racial injustice towards the Black community. 400 years later, the treatment of Black Americans evolved from lynching and burning to having a target on their backs, placed there by American law enforcement. In the beginning months of 2020, 3 Black souls lost their lives at the hands of white Americans. On February 23, 2020, Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old Black man, was fatally shot and killed running home from 3 white civilian men in a neighborhood of Satilia Shores in Brunswick, Georgia. A month later, on March 3, 2020, yet another Black man lost his life walking home from a church performance in Tacoma, Washington. Manuel Elise was stopped by 4 law enforcement officers who held him down until he lost consciousness. Even though he repeatedly screamed, "I can't breathe," he died. 10 days later, on March 13, 2020, in Louisville, Kentucky, a Black woman lost her life. Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her own home by a stampede of white police officers responding to a so-called drug dealing operation, later to be found false. The consecutive widespread killing of Black Americans seems to be an infectious disease. On May 25, 2020, a significant death of another Black soul happened, changing the course of history. George Floyd, a 46-year-old father, was murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Officer Shulman put his knee on Floyd's neck for approximately 9 minutes while Floyd was gasping for air, screaming, "I can't breathe." As he took his last breath, he let out his last cry, "Mama," a cry that would reach people across the globe and impact the very course of history. Quote, "The Black artist is dangerous. Black art controls the Negro's reality, negates negative influences, and creates positive images." Sonia Sanchez. 12 angry men and women, The Weight of the Weight, was a theater piece responding to not only the death of George Floyd, but the murder of so many other Black Americans due to racial discrimination in an unjust system. Stories of the Black voices who have encountered racial profiling from law enforcement. One of the Black stories written in this piece was Breonna Taylor's death story. An excerpt from this piece. Breonna Taylor was an emergency room technician. Her job was to help save lives, but hers was lost. Over 20 gunshots by the police entered her home in the middle of the night. 8 bullets that ultimately killed her. It took 20 minutes after she was shot for an emergency medical assistance to respond. As a young Black woman and protester, I've noticed when a Black man is murdered by a specific white American or a racially unjust system, people protest the death. And so very little do we for Black women. Time goes on, our loud voices start to get quiet and somewhat forgetful until the next Black life is taken. Dr. Indira Torres called it cultural amnesia. Quickly forgetting why we must continue the fight to stand up for what one believes in, to stand against an unjust or corrupt system, and to create change. Black artists used their craft to fight the long-standing battle of systemic racism in America. It is key to have Black artists speak to those in power by speaking truth to power during crucial moments of modern history. Different forms such as dance, music, poetry, and visual arts, and theater to tell the story of being Black in America, and it is a never-ending one. My brothers and sisters, the cycle continues as another Black soul was murdered, Sonia Macy. On July 6, 2024, 4 years since George Floyd, a white officer shot her in the head after she lifted her hands above her head and breathed out her last words, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Thank you.
Outstanding. Please give her another round of applause. Where do I read something that makes me shake from the breath of it just off the page? And when I read it, I was at my desk shaking. I said, ooh, this one here is going to disrupt the land because this is power. Power. I'm going to take a moment to break up.
Before I do, I'm sorry, that quickly, I forgot your name, Zinzale. Would you tell us what what's the conclusion of your paper, since you shared the beginning?
Well, my conclusion is that I kind of changed my conclusion. My conclusion was originally that we must change the chapter and move forward. But after Sonia Macy and knowing this presentation, I was like, it just feels like we keep going backwards and backwards. And a couple of days later, Kamala was announced that she's a candidate for vice president. So, there is open hope that, if she is elected to office, my conclusion is that the chapter can move forward and we can move forward as a society, as a community.
And would you share the name of your professor?
My professor is Professor Miles Brent Williams and Andrew Saito.
And was this paper written as part of a class?
It was written as it was a senior project, and I wanted to do a short film or a play, but I chose to do a paper instead. I feel like, to read it more and to write more read me a little bit more, and to do the research and to read, and it was something that kind of I needed to do.
Thank you.
I wanted to acknowledge, of course, the work of the village takes numbers of members of the village. I wanted to acknowledge some of the scholars in the room who have been part of the ongoing work of continuing this, the Young Scholars Competition, and who may or may not have been part of the reading of these papers. Dr. Sandra Shannon, our president, Judith Stevens, whom I missing, Beth Turner has served on that committee in the past, any other previous readers in the room?
I think you're good.
You think we're good?
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. Thank you for your words. We're going to do questions at the end. Is that what we're doing?
I think we need some tech help. We need some tech help. We need tech. Can we get to bring it back up?
Chris. Oh, Chris. We'll see.
While they are preparing, I will introduce our next scholar. And at the end, please hold, because they will be getting their awards and have time to take photos. We're firing the tech people. We're firing the tech people. Not you all. You know they say fire the DJ. Yay! You're hired. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, moving along to our graduate level winner, Ms. Tia Smith. Tia Smith is a second year. Yay! Tia Smith is a second year MFA student in dramaturgy and dramatic criticism at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale University. A graduate of Duke University, Tia earned her BA in Theater Studies with highest distinctions and African American Studies. She is the recipient of the 2024 Cody Renard Richards Scholarship and the 2023 New Wave Initiative Black Excellence Impact Award. As a Mellon-based undergraduate fellow, Tia conducted archival research for her award-winning honors thesis, The Making of Eden, an exploration of the Black theatrical and political climate of Steve Carter's Pan-African Romeo and Juliet. In 2021, Tia was co-commissioned with her sister to create a textile piece for Steppenwolf Theater's new education space. She is proud to be from the South Side of Chicago. I now present to you Tia Smith, our graduate award winner.
Hi, everyone. So today I will be presenting a section of my paper on the critical reception of Steve Carter's Pan-African Romeo and Juliet, Eden. Okay, so I'd like to begin by giving some background on Eden and Steve Carter as a playwright. So Eden is a semi-autobiographical drama that the playwright Steve Carter decided to write really about the origin story of his family. He was born in New York City and comes from dual heritage. So his mother was born in Trinidad and immigrated to the United States, and his father was a Black American from the rural South who immigrated north. And they were torn apart by his paternal grandfather, who believed that Black Americans were racially less pure than West Indians. Wow. The play premiered at the Negro Ensemble Company in 1976 at the St. Mark's Playhouse, and was so successful that it later moves to a larger theater and runs for over 100 performances. I think it's important to note that Steve Carter was a member of the Negro Ensemble Company. He was there pretty much from its inception, and notably, he was a staff dramaturg reading script submissions and also ran the playwrights workshop. Eden eventually becomes the first play in Steve Carter's Caribbean trilogy, which becomes a series of 3 plays that chronicle the experiences of Caribbean and Caribbean American families living in New York City throughout various boroughs during the 20th century. And specifically, my presentation is going to focus on the critical reception of Eden, and in looking at reviews across the 70s, 80s, and 90s throughout the United States, there were some patterns that I noticed. The first pattern I noticed is that sometimes critics diminish the originality that Carter brought to his work because they saw it as just a Black Romeo and Juliet and not a new or innovative piece of theater. And then the second piece is that there were several critiques of the choices that the characters made at the end of the play. So now I wanted to provide you with a description of Eden that I wrote myself. Set in 1927 San Juan Hill, Manhattan, Eden follows a love story between a young African-American man who recently immigrated from the rural South named Eustace Baylor and a West Indian-born 18-year-old girl, Annetta Barden, whose Garveyite father, Joseph Barden, attempts to force the two apart in the name of racial purity. It skipped over a slide. Okay. So now I want to get deeper into Eden being understood as a Black Romeo and Juliet. And this wasn't something that was merely just put on Eden, but it was a way in which the Negro Ensemble Company marketed its play. So the artists involved and the NEC understood it to be a Black Romeo and Juliet. And it also gets described as such in various critical reviews of the play. But what happens is that some critics see Eden as just a Black Romeo and Juliet, and they decide to value it in relationship to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet or other white authored plays and films that focus on interfaith or interethnic relationships. And I think what's really helpful to think about what Carter brings to Eden is to use what Zora Neale Hurston wrote and the characteristics of Negro expression, her definition of originality, which is, originality is the modification of ideas. The most ardent admirer of the great Shakespeare cannot claim first source even for him. It is his treatment of the borrowed material. Yes. So when we talk about Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare himself didn't even come up with the plot. It was his treatment of it. Yes. And that's the same way that we think about it. So now to get into what Steve Carter brought to writing his Black version of Romeo and Juliet. There are some critics who praise Eden for being one of the first plays to really center on a Black patriarch. There are other critics who praise Eden for being the first stage treatment that really depicts the conflict between Black Americans and Afro-Caribbeans. But there's more that Carter brought to Eden. It was his use of language, his representation of Southern Black vernacular, and just the technique in his writing. And so I wanted to bring forth Mary McClinton's experience, his and August Wilson's experience of seeing Eden at Penumbra in 1977. And Eden gets selected by Penumbra to be their first ever production because they see it as a way to stay connected to the Black arts movement. And so this is Mary McClinton. I think I saw Eden about 4 times because I had not seen anything like that. August did the same thing. He saw Eden like 6, 7 times. It was like a Louis Armstrong solo. What Louis Armstrong did to jazz that kind of invigorated everybody when he brought improvisation to it. There were rhythms that were brought into the play, rhythms brought to feeling and emotion that just plain weren't elsewhere. So now I'd like to get into the criticism that occurs throughout several reviews about the ending of the play. And I wanted to start by reading some quotes from reviews. The first one is from the New York Times, written by Clyde Barnes, who is reviewing the original production of Eden by the Negro Ensemble Company. Most of Eden works, but the ending sure is a strange one. The second one comes from Ann Haskins of the LA Weekly, and she is reviewing the Los Angeles and West Coast premiere of Eden in 1980. And she says, it's unconvincing that the daughter will promise her baby to the father without a vow that the whipping she endured won't be visited on her child. And so just to give some context, in the play, the Garveyite father is abusive to his children. Annetta and Eustace secretly have a relationship without the father knowing, and Annetta becomes pregnant. At the end of the play, when she realizes how her family dynamics have totally shifted and she's feeling alone. And for the first time ever, she's surrounded by Black Americans and not West Indians. She promises to her father that she will raise her child to be like him. Another New York Times review said, the two young people marry, and in a split-second reversal of character, the likable Eustace becomes a bore. And then my last quote comes from the WNYC radio review, which states, there are more shades and dimensions to the father than are communicated to us. There have to be. An ending that is supposed to have a dramatic wallop and has symbolic significance to boot just doesn't work. And so now I want to take the time to kind of go through these bottom 3 reviews and point back to Carter's script to actually show that his choices as a playwright and the characters' choices are supported within his play. So the first choice that gets critiqued is Annetta's decision to promise to raise her son or her unborn child like her father. And I think what is really important to know about Eden is that violence is something that becomes normalized. In the middle of the play, when Eustace sees the scars on Annetta's back from her father whipping her, she says that it's an act of love. And so I don't think that it is a shock to see that she would not be worried about that violence, and she associates it with love. And I also think it's important to point out that Joseph, who has become the perpetrator of violence, becomes a victim. When Annetta announces her pregnancy, Eustace and Joseph get into a fight, and Joseph, because of it, suffers a stroke. And so he is unable, to her knowledge, inflict violence on other people because he has lost the ability to speak and apparently lost the ability to move. As an audience, at the very last moment of the play, we see that Joseph has gained some mobility, but that is not information that other characters in the play have. And so we as the audience are aware that Joseph may strike again. But Annetta, feeling guilty for, she believes it is her fault why her father has become disabled, may not be able to see that future in this moment. The next criticism about Eden was about the character of Eustace, who is from the South, and how he becomes a likable person, but then becomes antagonistic and brash. And I think some of these criticisms are rooted in a simplistic understanding of Black Southernness and the idea that this character is nice and simple. One of the reviews from a Chicago production of Eden characterized Eustace as happy-go-lucky. And so I think it's really important to put the calls that Joseph has for racial purity in relationship to the eugenic movement that was happening at the time in which the play is set. And so in 1927, when Eden is set in real life, the U.S. Supreme Court decision of Buck v. Bell gave states the right to forcibly sterilize people who had any undesirable traits. And at that point in time, biological racism was prevalent. And the idea that complex traits like intelligence were simply just a matter of genetics, while it was understood to be true, but now today we know it is false. We know something like intelligence is primarily based on environment. And so Joseph is a character who sees traits and behavior as simply a matter of blood and genes. And he wants to eradicate Black Americanness from his family and his family's lives. And I think that when you have that context, then Eustace standing up for himself and saying that his unborn child is not going to be half Black American or half Caribbean, but is going to be whole, sounds like an appropriate response to me. And then the final point I want to talk about is Alvin Klein's radio review, in which he states there have to be more shades to Joseph than are communicated to us. And I think Carter has communicated those shades to us, but it just takes you knowing the historical background that animates the play to see them. So, in a monologue, the character of Joseph says, "We are trapped in this land with the people, who are almost ours. People who, when the water got hot, preferred to leap from the kettle." And what I think Joseph is talking about is the waning back to Africa movement. And in the 1920s, you see significant African American leaders step away from Garvey and even call for his deportation. In 1922, a series of events happened. The Black Star Line, Garvey shipping company that was supposed to support Black economic growth, goes bankrupt. Then Garvey gets convicted on mail charges. Then he has a very controversial a meeting with the leader of the KKK. All of these things push not just Black Americans, there were some Caribbeans as well, but many Black Americans to step away from Garvey. And so we start to see A. Philo Randolph, someone who was a supporter of Garvey, now advocate for Garvey to be deported with his Garvey Must Go campaign. Another significant debate that is happening around this time is the idea of racial incorporation versus racial separatism. So someone like W.E.B. Du Bois believes that Black people should be fighting for full citizenship in America. And Marcus Garvey believes that Black people all over the world should go to Africa because he does not believe that Black people will ever be incorporated into Western civilization. Because Du Bois has differing views from Garvey, he pens an op-ed in his magazine, The Crisis, called Lunatic or Traitor. And he brands Garvey as the worst thing to happen to Black people in their history. And so I think when you have the context of the Back to Africa movement slowly losing its support, and Joseph has hinged his freedom on this movement, then you understand that Eden is not simply a Black Romeo and Juliet, but it is more so a play about Black political freedom. I would like to say that there is an upcoming production of Eden at Yale Repertory Theater. So I invite you all to come, and I will be working as one of the
I'm excited.
Amazing.
I award from the Black Theater Network 38th Annual Conference in Winston-Salem, North Carolina presents the S. Randolph Edmonds Young Scholars Award to Zenzele Atwaro Daniels. The Black Theater Network 38th Annual Conference in Winston-Salem, North Carolina presents the S. Randolph Edmonds Young Scholars Award at the graduate level to Ms. Tia Smith. Thank you all so much. So now, it is time to head back over to the Brooks.
T, would you share with us who was your professor?
Yes.
Who worked with you?
Yes.
Oh, and I'm sorry, if there's any questions.
Yes.
This paper was originally my undergraduate thesis at Duke University, and my advisor there was Douglas A. Jones Jr. And then I worked on the paper again at Yale with Dr. Eric M. Glover.
Yeah. So, and we're going to have a question and answer session
Yes.
before we head over back to Brookstown Inn for some fun. So get your talents ready and get ready for the silent auction. Oh yes, you're going to perform, people. Too much talent. You're not hiding. You can run, but you can't hide. I got on heels, but I'll chase you. I'm gonna get you. So do you have any questions for our scholars? Please raise your hand.
I just want to observe in a conference when we've been talking about the ideas of context and history. Where's the sister that was earlier? We just all full of it here. I so appreciate the way both of you have looked at the present moment, have looked at what the noise of the world is saying, and have centered blackness to say, but let's look at what the context is. It's really lovely work, and I appreciate it.
I want to echo that, and also to just talk, like, I don't have a question, just a comment and an observation of how invigorating scholarship can be, and how to chronicle history accurately and powerfully is amazing in a room full of scholars, and to know that at this moment we have heard truth spoken to history. It cannot be echoed enough how appreciated it is. So,
Yes.
And I'd like to add, to be bold and brave enough to challenge that which has been written.
that's right.
I really admired their last piece. I came in late, but as the daughter of a proud Garveyite, I truly appreciated that. My daddy, he was the vice president of UNIA in New Orleans, and he went and started a chaplain at Katrina and Shreveport. And so growing up, it has always been like a fight, against that. And then as the older I get, the more I kind of see both sides. I have this Garvey, his methods with a why belief system in a way. And why the movement to Africa after all of that. So I just want to say, So I just want to say, that is something I really appreciate. It's something that I've been trying to articulate and paint this picture. And it is so beautiful. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Zenzele for putting our current history in context.
That's right.
And for you, Ms. Tia, for reclaiming our history.
Yes.
And telling us the truth.
School in the school.
Wow.
Thank you.
I wanted to just reflect the extraordinary maturity that I see in front of me. I don't remember thinking such thoughts or being so focused. I'm sort of blown away by the maturity, but I'm also, if I can just reflect back to BTN, to provide such a safe space for young people to find their voice, to show up authentically as themselves. Again, something I don't remember having at this age. So for me, this is just a powerful moment.
That's good.
I just want to say that I feel that our future is safe. Because of you all. And your scholarship, your research, your curiosity, and your determination shine upon us all. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Comment, a quick question. First, y'all so amazing, y'all genius. I'm going home and I'm calling my 23-year-old daughter and be like, what are you doing? I go wrong. Wow. My daughter's used to it. But what motivated each of you to pursue This is kind of an academic course.
Well, I took a Black theater class, and surprisingly, there was only in my school 3 Black students in it. And we kind of learned about certain situations. It was always interesting to me how, our art is very different from anybody else's art.
Yes.
It just comes within us and our DNA. It comes through us when we move, when we walk, when we talk. It's there. And for me, I realized that it's also a safe space for us, and we use as our safe space as art to value and to treasure. Sorry, I'm trying to find the good words to say. Because I personally believe that as African American and coming from my school and always not having people that look like me, of course, you always sit in a room in space like that, and realize that our art is sacred to us, and in a time like George Floyd or a time like anything like that, our sacredness is very important to us, and I realized that for myself.
I think what inspired me to do research was really my sister. I have a twin sister who a year ago graduated from Northwestern, and she studied theater. And she was the one who was the first to do archival research. She was the one who went on Google Books and went through all these issues of Ebony and Jet. And she was the one who told me about Eden as a play. And so really, it's through my sister who is always staying aware and being informative and being inquisitive. And I just carry on from what she does.
Wow. Okay, twin Jack, I have a twin sister too. I just wanted to know if you could get information to do a Black Theater Network night at Eden when it is produced.
We'll be there.
Because we can, especially those of us in New York, it's a short trip.
Yes.
So please.
Y'all better show up.
provide us with
California's gonna get there. I can't get
provide us with information, and we can be there,
But y'all
and
better
we'd like
show
to
up.
do a Q&A with you afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
As a former Randolph scholar, in fact, that's actually how I joined this movement.
Yeah.
I want to welcome you to this community. A couple of things. Do not lose the love you have for the world of the mind, to continue to research, to continue to fight the prevailing attitude about when they tell us who we are, and it's a lie. Maintain that courage, both of you showed. Maintain that courage, both of you showed, to speak truth. And understand that protest formulates itself in so many powerful ways in our heart. And remind us of that so that we can have the courage to continue to create. And understand that your observations of the work we're doing today can inform works that existed prior to us in a new way so we can speak to the audience that's in front of us. So thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say that I was particularly in love with the way that you used the text to justify the things the disagreement that you had towards what the critics were saying. I think sometimes we go so hard on our feelings and what we think about the work and what we saw that we're not really in the text and looking at what was put there, and just the way that you help that come off the page. It made me think about all of the things that I may have read about a show, or all of the critiques that I may have looked at, and do I need to just go back and look at the play and see what's coming off the page for myself? And I just thank you for that inspiration.
And I spoke about reading the Black protest paper, but yours was particularly difficult as the ex-wife of a Trinidadian man. whose family felt that an African-American woman was not a good fit. The relevance of it in my life. And looking at my Trinidadian and African-American children. And the fact that I feel it exists because it is relevant. And it is immediate. No matter how long ago when I read it, it took me back to my life. Now. And so these stories, and the fact that you all are going back and pulling that which was there, and that is current, and telling these things, and researching them, and pulling it out, unearthing the truths that were true then, and unfortunately, are still true now.
Tia, thank you. My name is Natalie Christopher. I'm the founder of Concho Productions, and our focus is on Caribbean diaspora and Caribbean voices, plays, and written by us. And the thing that you underlined today is the importance of marketing and the artist being in conversation. The very fact that NEC pitched this as, you know, the Caribbean Black Romeo and Juliet is not understanding the mission of the writer. He wrote this with a clear message, and you are underlining this was his intention, not what you pitched to sell tickets. And it's our responsibility to not sell tickets, but to honor the mission and the vision of the writer. Right. So thank you. Yes.
Y'all better step on the holy
And the importance of the culturally sensitive critic. There is a large market for what you're doing. People who are culturally sensitive to the material. You see what happens when people who don't look like us have an opportunity to write. Right. What you are doing is so important. Yes. The critic, the culturally sensitive critic.
Yes. Yes.
Welcome, y'all.